On April 3rd, 2023, at approximately 3 a.m., a loud explosion was heard coming from the Georgia Power substation off the Atlanta Highway in Gainesville, Georgia. The sound startled nearby residents, prompting them to call emergency services. Police and firefighters responded swiftly, arriving at the scene to investigate the source of the disturbance. Upon arrival, authorities observed that the perimeter fence surrounding the substation had been cut. Substations handle high-voltage electricity for regional power distribution. They are designed to be secure and marked with warning signs to prevent unauthorized access. However, the breach indicated someone had gained entry to the facility. Inside the substation, investigators found tools and signs of tampering with electrical components, specifically evidence that the copper wiring and other materials may have been targeted. Copper theft is a recurring issue due to the high value of the metal on the scrap market. Thieves often seek to remove copper from utility sites, construction zones, and abandoned buildings. However, attempting to extract materials from live electrical systems is extraordinarily dangerous, as even a minor mistake can trigger lethal outcomes. Substations contain transformers, circuit breakers, and other equipment designed to handle electricity at extremely high voltages, often reaching hundreds of thousands of volts. Even indirect contact with energized equipment can result in an electrical arc, which current jumps through the air to the nearest conductor. Such arcs generate immense heat, light, and sound, causing severe burns, explosions, or instantaneous death. As responders carefully searched the substation, mindful of the risks posed by live equipment, they discovered the bodies of 2 individuals. The men were later identified as Shane Joseph Long, 45 years old, and Christopher Blair Wood, 44 years old. They were both residents of Gainesville. Their bodies were found near damaged electrical components, indicating that they had been in the direct proximity to high voltage equipment when the explosion occurred. Investigators pieced together the sequence of events based on the evidence at the scene. Long and Wood had likely entered the substation late at night, equipped with tools for cutting and removing copper wiring. They had breached the security fence, ignoring visible warning signs of high voltage danger. The tools found near their bodies, such as wire cutters and gloves, pointed to an attempt to access copper components. During their actions, the men apparently disturbed live electrical equipment. The substation's high voltage system likely generated an electrical arc when a conductive tool or body part became too close to an active circuit. The resulting discharge not only triggered the explosion, but also delivered a fatal surge of electricity. The intensity of the arc's heat and energy would have made survival impossible. The explosion was so powerful that it caused damage to multiple pieces of equipment within the substation, including transformers and circuit breakers. The energy released would have been equivalent to thousands of amps of current discharging in milliseconds, a force capable of generating temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun. The heat, combined with the sound and shockwave, left a devastating impact. Emergency responders worked with Georgia Power officials to secure the substation and assess its safety. Technicians conducted a thorough inspection of the damaged equipment, ensuring there were no residual risks, such as exposed wires or lingering electrical charges. The process required isolating the affected area to prevent further accidents and ensuring that the surrounding community's power supply remained stable. The bodies of Long and Wood were removed from the substation after the area was deemed safe for responders. The Hall County Sheriff's Office worked in collaboration with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to transport the remains for autopsy. The medical examiner's findings confirmed the electrocution was the primary cause of death, with severe burns and internal injuries consistent with exposure to high-voltage electricity. Responders also collected and cataloged evidence at the scene, including the tools, personal belongings, and damaged components, to build a complete picture of what occurred. The investigation sought to confirm whether the breach was premeditated or if other motives might have been involved. However, all indications pointed to an attempt at copper theft that ended in tragedy. In Opelika, Alabama, lived a family of 5. consisting of Corey and Tracy Andrews. They were the parents of 3 young kids. Their family was still in its early years, so they wanted to make as many memories as they could while their kids were still young. They often went to fun places like parks, family dinner spots, and outings to nearby places in Auburn, Alabama. On October 14th, 2017, the family decided to go out for ice cream at Brewster's Real Ice Cream, a popular ice cream shop in Auburn, to enjoy a treat and spend quality time together. The kids being quite young, the eldest being 8, the middle child being 5, and the youngest, Sadie Grace Andrews, was 3. Sadie, being 3, had a lot of energy and was very playful. When they got there, she was happily jumping and very excited to get some ice cream. The family went inside and got their ice cream. They sat down and started to eat. Like I said, with Sadie being only 3 years old, she was very playful, so she stood up and started moving around while eating. Apparently unnoticed by her parents, she started moving further away from them. She then spotted a black plastic lid. This lid was covering a grease trap. Brewster's, like many other food service establishments, had a grease trap located outside the building. These grease traps are standard components used in the food industry to separate fats, oils, and grease from wastewater. The trap at Brewster's was installed underground, covered by a black plastic lid. This type of cover, while functional for maintenance purposes, it was not designed to bear weight. So when Sadie went up to it and stood on it, the black lid collapsed under her weight, sending her falling approximately 4 feet into a mixture of water and grease. When the parents noticed that she was missing, they began to look around but couldn't find her. They started calling her name and walking around to locate her. They then saw the hole in the ground and looked into it. There, they saw Sadie in the pit with her face down. They immediately called emergency services. The responders arrived quickly and they were able to take Sadie out of the grease trap. Emergency personnel attempted life-saving measures, including CPR, as they worked to stabilize her, but it was no use. Sadie was pronounced dead. She had drowned in the water, grease, and waste materials. After the tragedy, the Auburn Police Department conducted an investigation into the incident. They examined the grease trap to determine whether it complied with safety regulations and standards. The cover of the trap, a lightweight black plastic lid, was found to be inadequate as it gave way under Sadie's weight. If the small restaurant had complied with safety regulations and standards, Sadie would still be alive. Her parents filed a lawsuit on May 3, 2018. Corey and Tracy Andrews initiated legal action in the Lee County Circuit Court. The lawsuit named multiple defendants, including Brewster's Ice Cream, the City of Auburn, and several companies involved in the design, manufacture, and installation and maintenance of the grease trap. The suit alleged negligence and wrongful death, asserting that the grease trap was improperly designed, installed, and maintained, leading to the fatal accident. It's not publicly known if they won or not, but my guess is they did. Six-year-old Alfredo Rampi was a lively and curious boy living in Rome with his family. His parents, Fernando and Franca Rampi, cherished their son, who had a keen sense of adventure and nature. 6-year-old Alfredo often visited their country house in Vermicino, a small rural area outside of Rome. On June 10, 1981, Alfredo and his parents spent the evening outdoors in Vermicino. It was a peaceful setting, surrounded by open fields, but the terrain was dotted with hazards common in rural areas, such as wells and unmarked construction sites. As the evening progressed, Alfredo asked his father if he could go for a short walk near their home. His father agreed, but kept an eye on his son from a distance. At some point, Alfredo became separated from his father. The family initially believed he might have wandered off while exploring the nearby fields. When the father could no longer see Alfredo or hear him respond to his calls, he became alarmed. After a brief search, he contacted the authorities for assistance. Rescuers, local residents, and volunteers joined the search, combing the fields and surrounding areas. Late that night, they discovered a narrow, artesian well, approximately 80 meters or 262 feet deep, with a diameter of just 30 centimeters or 12 inches. Fearful that Alfredo might have fallen into the well, the rescuers called his name and heard faint cries in response, confirming he was trapped inside. What followed was one of the most dramatic and highly publicized rescue attempts in Italian history. Alfredo was wedged approximately 36 meters or 118 feet down the well. Rescuers quickly realized that the narrow diameter of the shaft made it impossible for an adult to descend to his location. Instead, they lowered a microphone and flashlight to monitor Alfredo's condition and provide comfort through communication. His voice was weak but recognizable, and he was able to respond to the rescuers' calls. The rescue operation presented unprecedented challenges. Engineers and experts were consulted to devise methods to extract Alfredo safely. One idea involved lowering a board into the well for Alfredo to grab onto and pull himself up, but this was unsuccessful. Another plan involved drilling a parallel shaft to reach him from the side. However, the terrain and proximity of the well made this extremely difficult and time-consuming. The loose soil threatened to collapse, further complicating the rescue effort. As the hours passed, the story gained national and international attention. Italian television stations began broadcasting the rescue live, with millions of viewers glued to their screens hoping for a positive outcome. Volunteers, including spelunkers and cavers, arrived at the scene, offering their assistance. Several small-framed volunteers were lowered into the well in attempts to reach Alfredo, but none succeeded in freeing him. The operation was plagued by technical and logistical failures. Investigators later noted discrepancies in accounts of the wall's diameter, as some volunteers had been able to descend without difficulty, raising questions about its original construction. The builders claimed it was nearly impossible for a child to accidentally fall into the well, suggesting other possibilities. Also, a harness found on Alfredo's body sparked debate. Some rescuers who made a rescue attempt said it was used to secure Alfredo during their efforts. However, others suggested it might have been placed deliberately. Further complicating the case were Alfredo's own words, recorded during communication with rescuers. The child appeared disoriented and referred to the wall as a dark room with a door that needed to be broken. This unusual language was attributed to oxygen deprivation and prolonged exposure to the confined space, but it added to the speculation surrounding his fall. Despite their best efforts, rescuers faced insurmountable obstacles. The unstable ground slowed the drilling of the parallel shaft, and attempts to widen the existing well dislodged debris, endangering Alfredo further. Over time, his voice grew weaker, and long silences became more frequent, signaling his deteriorating condition. By the third day, rescuers made one final attempt to reach Alfredo by lowering a small volunteer into the well. However, by the time they reached the depth where Alfredo was trapped, he had succumbed to asphyxiation and injuries. His body was recovered nearly a month later, on July 11, 1981. The tragedy raised significant questions about the handling of the rescue and the circumstances of his fall. Some theorized that the incident had been staged or mishandled to divert public attention from political scandals, such as the discovery of the secret Masonic lodge. Others argued that the harness on Alfredo's body pointed to deliberate lowering into the well. These theories, however, remained unsubstantial due to insufficient evidence. Elizabeth Mary Isherwood, a 60-year-old former police officer, Wolverhampton, England, embarked on a solo vacation in September 2017. A mother and grandmother, Elizabeth was known as a determined and independent woman who valued her time for reflection and relaxation. She chose the Place Targarth Country Club, a holiday complex near Penal, Gwynedd, Wales, for its serene setting and comfortable accommodations. Elizabeth checked into her villa on September 23, 2017, with plans for a peaceful and uneventful getaway. The evening of her arrival began as expected. Elizabeth settled into her villa, unpacked, and prepared to rest for the night. However, sometime during the night, she woke up. It is believed she became disoriented in the unfamiliar surroundings and mistakenly entered a small airing cupboard, commonly used in UK homes for drying clothes and housing water tanks, instead of heading to the bathroom. Once inside the cupboard, the door closed behind her, the handle reportedly loose or defective, detached from the internal mechanism, rendering the door unopenable from the inside. Elizabeth found herself trapped in the dark and confined space with no way to call for help. The cupboard was a small, enclosed room without a light or ventilation. Realizing the seriousness of her situation, Elizabeth began attempting to escape. She removed wooden shelving from the cupboard, possibly to create more space or to use makeshift tools to force the door open. As time passed, her attempts grew increasingly more desperate. During her efforts to free herself, Elizabeth accidentally broke a copper water pipe located inside the cupboard. The pipe burst, causing water to spray continuously into the small space. The water quickly drenched her and began pooling on the floor. Despite this additional challenge, Elizabeth persisted in her efforts. She used pieces of the broken pipe to try to pry the door open and even attempted to break through the cupboard's walls. At one point, Elizabeth succeeded in creating a hole in one of the walls. Tragically, the hole was blocked on the other side by a mounted picture frame, preventing her from realizing that she had nearly broken through to freedom. With no way of knowing she was so close to escape, she continued her hostile environment of the cupboard. As the water continued to spray from the broken pipe, the temperature inside the cupboard began to drop significantly. Elizabeth, wearing little to no clothes at the time, became exposed to the cold, wet conditions. Over time, her body temperature began to fall. The combination of prolonged exposure to cold water and the lack of insulation in the small space created the perfect conditions for hypothermia to set in. Despite her relentless attempts to escape, Elizabeth eventually succumbed to the effects of hypothermia. Her body was discovered several days later after caretakers of the holiday complex noticed water leaking from her villa. Concerned about the unexplained water damage, they entered the property to investigate. Inside, they found extensive flooding, and to their shock, Elizabeth's lifeless body in the airing cupboard. An inquest into Elizabeth's death revealed the full extent of the tragic chain of events. It was determined that the malfunctioning door handle was the root cause of her entrapment. The coroner recorded a verdict of misadventure, concluding that Elizabeth's death resulted from an unfortunate accident compounded by a series of preventable factors. The report highlighted how the poorly maintained door handle had set off the sequence of events that ultimately led to her death. Following the inquest, Elizabeth's family expressed their profound grief and frustration. They pursued legal action against the holiday company responsible for the property's upkeep, citing negligence in maintaining the villa. The family argued that proper maintenance and routine checks could have prevented the malfunctioning door handle from trapping Elizabeth in the cupboard.